If you're looking to become a psychologist, then let this be your guide. With this podcast at your side, you'll be on your way to being qualified. It's the Aspiring Psychologist podcast with Dr. Marianne, Trent.
Hi, welcome along to the Aspiring Psychologist podcast. Thank you so much for being part of my world and for listening to today's episode. Now, today's episode is all about training professionally as a psychologist when you are a parent. But please, if you are not yet a parent, please do still listen, because it raises such important considerations for when you start to consider your own parenting journey. And also, if you don't want to or can't have children of your own, it helps you to think about how you might optimally support those around you within training, or even within your life generally, who have children. So it raises some really important and interesting debates. I'm joined for today's podcast by Rose Dunstan, who is a trainee clinical psychologist. And you can watch our chat on YouTube on the Good Thinking Psychological Services YouTube page if you'd like to, but you of course don't need to watch it if you don't want to. You can just listen. I need to apologize that my audio is quite quiet in today's podcast. I'm not quite sure why, so you might just need to turn it up ever so slightly, but I have adjusted the jingles so that they're a little bit quieter so they won't suddenly deafen you. I don't know what happened there, but needed to make sure that you could hear both myself and Rose throughout, so I hope that you will find that okay. Also need to say that I only spotted when I was editing that I'd accidentally used the wrong frame on YouTube. It does say Aspiring Psychologist Membership rather than Aspiring Psychologist Podcast, but Rose's details are all correct, and I will admit that's the only side I checked because I assumed it was right. But as we all know, assume makes an ass of you and me, so I hope you will forgive me and not think that I am indeed an ass. If you do, thanks anyway for listening and still being part of my world whilst simultaneously thinking that I am an ass. That said, if you are interested in the Aspiring Psychologist membership, we have had lots of success with getting people onto training courses this year, which is just wonderful. But it does mean we've got a few spaces available, and then it's open for more members from the 1st of July. So if you're interested in that, then do check out the Linktree link, which gives you more details of the membership, and that can be found in the show notes or usually at the top of all of the socials for where you see me online. Okay, I think that is everything for now, but I hope you find it a really useful episode. It is a slightly longer episode than usual because there was so much to say. So yeah, cozy up, give yourself a chunk of time, because I think it is getting on for just over 50 minutes, 50, so quite a lot longer than usual, but all good stuff and such important personal and professional debates in psychology. So this is mainly taken, perhaps only taken really from a female perspective. I would love to be able to have similar debates with someone who identifies as male about becoming a parent on the course or starting training, with children or child already. So if that describes you and you'd like to come on the podcast, then do please make contact with me. But otherwise, just enjoy and, have an open mind if you're not yet a parent. And this, just really interesting conversation between myself and Rose. So hope you'll find it useful, and I'll catch you again at the end. So I am joined by Rose today. Hi, Rose. Thank you so much for joining me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My name is Rose Dunstan. I am a third-year trainee on the Doctorate of Clinical Psychology training. and I'm also the mother of a little boy who's just turned 4.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, like 4-year-olds are bags of fun, but they are also high energy, and take a lot from you. So could you tell us a little bit about your journey to psychology before we start to think about your little boy, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. So you can probably tell from my accent, I wasn't born here. I was born in Australia, and that's where I did my undergrad. So I did that full time in psychology, and I also worked. Actually, I really fell on my feet. I worked for a really lovely mental health charity full time alongside my undergraduate degree. And I say it was lovely because it really had a very strong ethos for recovery. Um, there were lots and lots of peer support workers. All of my managers had lived experience of distress, and heard voices. And so I worked there for about 4 years in various roles, and including at the end doing a research assistant role. And that was in a project to support voice hearers into the workplace. And I think part of the other reason I really enjoyed that role is that they brought in lots of external trainers, and lots of them came from the UK. So they brought over Eleanor Longdon and Rufus May and Jackie Dillon, Ron Coleman, and these are sort of lots of the names that you hear sort of in mental health or in psychosis from this country. And I guess that's sort of what drew my attention to maybe moving here. So I moved to England with my husband, and it was meant to be for a short period of time, and I thought I would go home and train in Australia, but then I just sort of fell in love with the country. And once I moved here, I had sort of very similar roles. I worked for a charity where I managed a high support residential service for people with a sort of inverted commas severe and persistent mental illness, so just people with experiences of psychosis or I guess childhood trauma, lots of complex trauma. And I did that for quite a long time, and I sort of also managed some employment services to support people into work. And I think I got to a stage where I'd just been really loving all of my jobs. I'd been growing a lot. But I felt like my learning started to plateau, and it had always been in the back of my mind that I would apply for clinical psychology training. So I think once I realised I was going to live here forever and my learning started to plateau in these other jobs, that's when I sort of turned my sights to training. And I completed a master's here, which I did alongside a full-time job, and then applied for my first AP job. And that was in a neurodevelopmental assessment service for children. And then I had a child, and I got into training. So it was sort of perhaps quite a different journey to other people. I was never in a rush. It was, for me, I think, I felt like I'd always end up as a clinical psychologist, but I just found myself in jobs that I just really enjoyed and I was very passionate about. I was learning a lot. And so I sort of meandered my way here, I guess.
Well done to you. I was speaking to someone earlier that was saying, I can't believe I get paid to do this because I would actually do it for free. And that's when you know that this is a career that is just a bit of you, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Although the pay helps.
Oh, the pay most definitely helps. The pay most definitely helps.
Make it very challenging otherwise.
Yeah, just before we start thinking about children, I know that I have got people that do listen to the podcast in Australia, and I know that a question I will be asked if I don't ask you is how it worked, moving from Australia to the UK, and whether you were then eligible to apply for the funded places. Just that sort of question, if you're comfortable answering it.
Yeah, certainly. So first of all, you need to be aware of whether your degree would be accredited here. So in both countries are a little bit like our degrees are better than the other person's. So it is something you need to look into. You need to make sure you have the full 4-year degree in Australia to be able to convert it here by the BPS. For me, I have British heritage, so I already had a UK passport even before I decided to move here. So it made moving to the country quite simple. But you do need to have lived here for, I think it's 3 years to get the residency, and that's a continuous 3 years. So you can't have like sort of been out of the country for too long during that period. There are sort of set time frames. I think it's 3 years. You need to double check that. And once you're considered a resident of this country, you can apply. I think courses will look out though for, they want people who are going to stay here, so they will, I think, probably look out for that a little bit. A commitment to staying and working in the NHS. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much for our slight deviation, but I know that will be a question that I am asked because it's important, isn't it? Especially the variability and diversity in our workforce. And that, I do believe, and I've said before, that I've got the best job in the world. Why wouldn't someone in a different country know that and think, I'd love to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can relate to that.
So, before we started recording, we were speaking a little bit about your experience of applying to the doctorate. Would you be okay telling us a little bit about what that was like and where baby fell in that, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. So I think, one of the reasons why I guess I'm here and why I'm, I guess, quite passionate about this is because I agonized over the decision to have a baby, and I can't underscore that enough. Like, it really was agony, because there are these really dominant narratives, I think, that you can't get onto training. It's incredibly hard, and that having any sort of difference just makes it harder, I think. And having a child would mean, I guess, that you might be discriminated against by courses, but also that you can't get the adequate experience that you need to get onto training. And then even if you happen to get on, that you can't complete training with children because it is just so incredibly challenging. And I heard that very strongly in the complete absence, actually, of having any narratives or stories of people who had completed training with children. I don't know, I really felt that. And I was really in a place where it's like, what if, what ifs, they're never good, are they? But what if I dedicate myself to training and I finish and I am unable to have children? Or what if I have a child and that means that I can never get onto training? And I think because there's two very uncertain things, having a child, you have no idea what your life would look like with a child. And then, so you can't sort of plan and think how I could make that work because you don't really know. And then training, you just don't know that you don't know what the experience will be like, but also you don't know if you'll get on or when you'll get on. Will I get on when I'm 32 or 35 or 38? And what does that mean for my fertility? So I really struggled with it. And I guess I just started applying. I applied after I had got my first AP job. And I did have the baby, and I applied before I knew that I was pregnant. So during when sort of the interview season came up, and I was offered 3 interviews, I was sort of 8 months pregnant, and my son was born prematurely. So that meant that actually the day he was born, I think I had an interview, or maybe it was the day after. And so obviously couldn't attend. And then I was quite poorly after he was born, and I was in hospital for a week. And then I had an interview 2 days after I'd gotten out of hospital. And I attended that interview. And I think on reflection, that seems actually ridiculous. Like a really almost silly thing to do. But I think, again, there was this narrative that, like, even if you get an interview this year, you might not get one next year. So you have to apply. Oh, so you have to go, I have to do it. And I did do it, having not slept for 10 days, and it didn't go well. Well, actually, do you know what? To be fair, the interview went well, but there was a written component that my brain just wouldn't function for. And then I had an interview about a week after that, which I did attend, and I got on a reserve list for that one. But I actually think another probably important part of that motivation to attend is also financially. So I think at that stage, my financial situation was such that I thought I might have to work in about 6 months anyway. And part of my rationale was, well, I could work as an AP, and after I paid for my childcare and my travel, I'll bring home about £50 a week. Or I could go back to a more demanding job, which would be training, but at least I'd have enough money to sort of survive on. And I think that is probably, one of the big barriers, I think, to having children when you're trying to get onto the DClin is the cost of childcare is just eye-wateringly high. It will be almost your entire income as a Band 4 AP. So I guess that was the process, and then so I didn't get on that year, and then I applied again the following year, and I got 2 interviews and 2 offers. But at that stage, my son was a year old.
Oh, well done to you. And honestly, you're my hero, attending interviews for doctorate training whilst in the fog of being a very new mother. Kudos to you. And also getting a reserve list place that year. Like, you are my hero. So well done to you on that. Can I ask, when you were applying the next year, whether you considered more family-friendly courses, or whether you considered any factors around, having your son, or was it purely the traditional, I like the sound of that course, and, I've met other trainees, etc.?
I didn't change. Well, it's really hard to get any sort of sense of who is family friendly from the information on the clearinghouse. And in fact, I don't think any of the courses appear family friendly. I don't think it's mentioned anywhere. I've certainly never heard of courses that invite parents to attend or speak to it in the information that they put out before you apply. So it was it was a little bit blind, actually. It was more about what I thought the ethos would be. But actually, having said that, I then actually attended, so the 2 interviews that I attended that year, I actually attended one where I think they made it very clear, actually, it wasn't even covert, they made it very clear, I think, that they would not support parents to get through training or carers. There was very much sort of a spiel at the beginning that made it clear that you had to do this on your own, and we weren't going to make adjustments for you. And my heart, it was so devastating. I remember I finished that interview and I walked out the door, and my first thought was, I did really well today. I think I'm going to get an offer. And my second thought, which I followed about 2 seconds later, was, and I cannot accept it. I knew that I would have a miserable time. I knew that I probably wouldn't even get through it. And then the following week, I did this other interview at my training course that I'm on, and it couldn't have been a more different experience. In my interview, they asked me, how are you going to, what are your thoughts and how you might manage being a parent and doing this course? And I could speak to that. And that was fine. They seemed quite warm, and they sort of said that they do try to take that into account, and there are some adjustments that they can make, and they explained what they were. And it was such a relief. And then, of course, I got the 2 offers, and I knew exactly where I needed to be. So it was actually very helpful, really, in the end. But it was also, quite heartbreaking as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so important to be treated as a human and someone that matters in this process, not just a number who can be so easily replaced, because you're a person, you've got a life, you matter to lots of people, and having you just scrape through or survive, that's not what we want. We want you to, as much as possible, thrive and really enjoy aspects of your training, if not the whole thing, but to also thrive as a mother, and to have enough resources left over at the end of a day or a week to feel like you're not just utterly exhausted, and then you can be a parent as well.
Yeah, and I think also, there's so much talk about widening access and the importance of, and I know parenting isn't a protected characteristic. It is, maternity is sort of for the first, whilst you're pregnant, and for a year after, but it's not protected. But I think the experience, parents bring a different experience to training, and there is a knowledge and an experience that can enrich sort of the knowledge of the cohort and experiences on placement. So it is valuable, and I think it is important to have different people represented on cohorts.
It really is. There's a lady on my cohort who had 2 children. There's a few people that had children, but had 2 children, and I just really valued her insight, and she became sort of the mummy of our group as well. And she was the first person I'd ever heard when she was talking about parenting her children. The first person I'd ever heard to say, "I love you very much, but I do not like that behavior." And it was that separation for me that was really useful. You're not saying I don't like the child, you're saying I don't like the behavior. And so going on to a CAMS placement with that kind of real world practical experience was really useful for me. I didn't really have many people in my life who had children, so it was a really useful resource. Like you said, you're not a burden on the cohort, you're actually a real asset.
Yeah, I think that too. I think you get that from everyone in the cohort. Like, everyone brings something slightly different, and it really enriches it. I can think of so many people who are just popping to mind now who I've learned so much from those little comments in teaching or in that small tutorial group where they've just spoken to their experience of something, and it's planted a seed that you can draw on later.
I love that. You're all part of a jigsaw that fits together to enrich each other's experience.
Definitely.
And as you were talking, I was thinking about maybe there's room here for courses to speak to this in their, application information about, becoming a parent either during training. They try to dissuade that quite heavily, don't they? But it does happen. People will have standard maternity leave within a normal fixed term contract, which is training, and will get occupational maternity pay throughout training. And it's quite common, I think, in my experience, for at least a couple of people per cohort to have a baby at some point during that 3-year fixed period.
Yeah, we've had quite a few people, I think, in my cohort as well. And it really bothers me that there is a strong message where people are dissuaded from doing that. I think people need to be able to make decisions about their own lives, and if it feels like the right time to have a child, and there might be so many reasons for that people should be supported in those decisions. I think, as it is quite difficult to get onto training and it can take quite a long time, I think that the average age is about 28, and we're talking about often at the moment women. I don't know that people actually consider the impact on people's fertility as well. I do know people who have had eggs frozen because they've been so worried. I know even more who've looked into it. I myself looked into it. And I was put off because the cost is just so high and it's incredibly intrusive. And I think just because you want to get people through a course, like there's like this rule, like I guess throughput must be the main KPI, I imagine, for NHS or Education England. But actually, we're not just a number, we are human beings. And if people want to have families and it feels like the right time, I think people need to be supported to do that. And I guess it is a question that comes up a lot. You'll see it on like the AP groups, and what happens if I get pregnant? Will I get kicked off the course? There are these real, like, I don't think people understand their employment rights, that, you are entitled to maternity leave. You are entitled to 5 days of carers leave a year. You can apply for flexible working. Some courses, I think, would support that. Some probably would not. But, we are able to ask for flexible working arrangements.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And I was trying to reflect on my experience of training, and also my knowledge of having young children. And I had my children after I'd qualified. But, I know that when I was working in the NHS, there had to be some flexibility for suddenly, you suddenly get a call on a Monday saying, your child is getting the merit this weekend on Friday. Can you come? And you're like, oh man, could you not have booked it a bit earlier? But then suddenly, you're due into assembly on Friday to watch them get the merit. And I was trying to reflect how that would have been during training. And Friday was our teaching day. So there really, I don't think, would have been much flexibility. You know, they might have said I could have gone late, but if it had cropped up on a placement day, I think that my placement supervisors were very human. So long as it wasn't going to impact too much on the day, or if I was going to then work from home a little bit that evening, I think it would have been supported, because my placement supervisors definitely saw me as a human. And they were all parents, I think. And I think that really helps with the context, doesn't it? If someone gets the real struggles about being a parent, then they're more willing to be flexible and to make a bespoke fit for you that helps you and helps the service.
Yeah, absolutely. I've also had really wonderful experiences with my supervisors. They've all been incredibly supportive. And in fact, one wasn't a parent, but I think she was quite open about that and just really curious and was like, I might not understand things, please explain them to me. But she also, I know that she went out and asked her friends who had children and asked people about different experiences of children of a similar age. And I valued that so much that she actually took the time to try to understand what my context looks like and some of the demands that I do have on me. So yeah, really excellent experiences. I do know that that's not universal. So I've certainly spoken to people who have had a really rough time trying to negotiate even very small changes, like can I work 8:30 to 4:30 instead of 9 to 5? And even when there wasn't a specific service reason why that couldn't happen, it's just no, we only do 9 to 5 type responses. I wonder though if that has changed. Like that was just pre-pandemic, so I do wonder if maybe COVID has helped people to think and work more flexibly and to be more okay with flexible working.
Yeah, I think when I was newly qualified, I was having to travel like 30 miles each way to get to work, and it was central Birmingham, which was a nightmare to get in and out of. And so there was flexibility with them allowing me to work early and giving me a key to get into the building and giving me the fire safety codes to turn off all the alarms and things. And I think if I, because often you'll need to drop the kids at nursery at a certain time, won't you? And then be on your way. And it just adds that bit extra time. So I think do ask for flexibility, because if you don't ask, you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your ex-supervisor sounds wonderfully holistic and actually really practicing what we preach with clients. But actually, it's really important we do that with our colleagues and with our workforce too.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that has been my experience. Is generally people have been really, really supportive and really understanding. And so alongside my placement supervisors, we call them a manager at my training course. I think places call them a clinical tutor. Has been really wonderful as well. Really supportive. And I think I think before I felt like I would be seen as a burden, or I'd be seen as like the trainee with extra needs, and that's an annoyance to people. I create extra paperwork or need more time or need more meetings or whatever. But I don't think I've ever been made to feel like that. There has been a real just sort of like, acceptance that, I am a person, I do have other needs, and actually my role as mother is incredibly important. And people, are practicing what they preach as psychologists, that, attachment and achievement and being there for your children is crucial.
It really is. It really is. But also, as a parent myself, I know it's just it's a mad ride. It's a mad ride. And training can feel that way as well. And then, of course, it's not just the placements. It's not just the teaching days. There's also assignments. How have you found, putting assignments around your work life, but also your family life?
Yeah. It was much easier pre-COVID. So actually, I think for the first 6 months of my course, I think I managed all of that. I managed things really well. I went in very, very organized. I did a lot of planning about sort of where I would live. I did relocate for the course, where my son's nursery was, trying to like minimize stress at the beginning and end of the day. And I worked on my assignments very early. So I was like really aware that he could get sick, a week before an assignment is due. So I just started everything early, and I really made very good use of all of my time. So I think I finished my first assignment about 2 or 3 months early. And that was working really well. And then COVID came, and I actually became very ill. I got COVID sort of before the first lockdown. I got long COVID. I also have some chronic health problems, and it all interacted, and I became quite poorly. So I've sort of been managing that alongside as well. And what it ended up meaning is I had to really evaluate what I could do. So what were these balls that I have in the air, and which ones are glass and which ones are rubber? And I decided that my placement was a glass ball. I had to really do the right thing by my clients and by my services, and focus on that work. Obviously, my child and my family was a glass ball, and these balls that can't drop it. And I guess assignments became the balls that could drop. And I just had some really open conversations with my manager, and all of my deadlines were moved to places that felt more manageable. So I haven't been working at the same rate as other people. I have more time to complete my assignments. It's really hard to say. That really has been framed around my health, and I'm not sure how it would be framed if it was purely from a parenting perspective. I suspect that I would be supported to move deadlines because of parenting, maybe not to the same extent. It is quite difficult to say. Yeah. So yeah, basically I haven't kept up with my assignments is the short answer. I'm getting there, but
do you tend to use your study days to do your assignments, or is your little boy, perhaps during COVID, your little boy was there all the time? I don't know what the agreement was with your nursery. Some just shut, didn't they?
Yeah, so his nursery did shut, but for a few weeks we did this ridiculous system where my husband and I would work between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. so we both got a full day of work in, and did childcare amongst it. But fortunately we got him into a hub nursery, but it was 40-minute drive away. We were doing an hour and a half driving each per day to get him into some childcare. So we were very fortunate in that sense. We didn't completely lose childcare. So yeah, I use my study days really effectively. It is my free time. He is in childcare. I need to get things done, and I think that was one of the things about being a parent, is that one of the challenges is a loss of flexibility. You can't just work whenever you want, whenever suits you, whenever you feel like it, or some motivation kicks in. You have to work at set times, around childcare. And in some ways that's really helpful, though. I think it does mean that I procrastinate less. I get more things done in the blocks of time that I have, because I know it will feed into my time with my son, and that is huge motivation to just get things done. I don't want to be locked in an office all weekend ignoring him. I want to spend my weekends with him. So there are pros and cons to it.
Definitely. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think would be useful for us to talk about, or anything to add in any of the areas that we've spoken about?
I guess maybe we could speak a little bit through maybe some of the pros and cons of parenting. I don't know if that might help during the decline. It might maybe bring it to life a little bit for people who are thinking about having a child. Yeah, so I think
Certainly,
maybe...
please do.
Yeah, so I guess maybe for me, I think the pros, there are so many pros that are sort of I never envisaged. And I think one of them is just how much joy that is brought into my life from having a child, and the love, and to be met with cuddles and have someone in your life who's just always so happy to see you. It's really nice. And I think how play forces you to be very mindful and very present. It pulls you away from your worries. I spent a lot of time stomping in puddles and looking at aeroplanes and animals and flowers, and I just think it's really good for my mental health, and it's really good to pull me away from the stresses of the doctorate, perhaps. I guess I've already spoken a bit about time management and how that helps me there. But I think maybe also it really brings theories to life for me. So, for instance, attachment theory, it's not that complicated to understand, but I think when you have it right in front of you, it sort of you can see like what attunement looks like. This is I'm attuned to my child right now, and you can see how like separation anxiety and things play out. It brings like developmental psychology to life. I always forget like the milestones and the stages, and now I don't, because they're right there in front of me. And perhaps it helps me a little bit with on placement, working with families. I remember when I worked in the neurodevelopmental assessment service, always being like quite puzzled why parents couldn't remember milestones. Like, when did your child first sleep through the night? They have no idea. Or like when they uttered their first word. And so like, how do you not know this? It's like, well, now I know why they don't know this. Like, a lot happens in that time.
It's perhaps appropriate for me to now disclose that the tooth fairy did forget to come in our house last night. Like, it matters very much at that moment.
Yeah.
But then a split second later, you're on to doing something else and you just forget. And yeah, sometimes you do drop those balls. And I love that idea of your rubber balls and glass balls. I hadn't heard of that before, but I'm going to keep that. But yeah, I'm hoping that the tooth fairy doesn't turn out to be a glass ball, and we're going to be able to repair that rupture this evening.
Ongoing consequences for forgetting. But it is this, it's like the fallibility of parents. And I think when you're like working in camps maybe, and you're thinking about homework tasks that parents are supporting children with, really being able to hold in mind what everyone's experience is obviously different, but having an idea of some of the demands that might be on that parent and why they might not be able to support that child with that task. And it's like all those things. You don't need an experience to understand it, but I think it certainly helps, perhaps.
So there's some of the positives, and I definitely, we do this thing when we go to bed each one. I'm not going to bed, but my kids are. What was the favourite part of your day, and what was the least favourite part of the day? And the kids both do theirs, and then they'll ask me. And sometimes they all say, "What's the funniest part of your day?" And you're like, "Oh God, I really didn't have a very funny day today," But it does force you to look for that gratitude, and to look for the things that we could make different tomorrow, and the things we could strive to do better, or in a different way. And I really love that, just some of my joyful moments will be when my little boy's like really in my face. And the other day we were talking about teeth and how white my little boy's teeth are, because they're like super white, aren't they? And he goes, "Mummy, you've got beautiful golden teeth." And I'm like, oh. But, they think they're being really nice. Actually, like, we're basically saying I've got yellow teeth. Thanks, kid. But, just adorable
Yeah.
love. And, like you said, they're so pleased to see you. You get a cheer when you walk through the door.
Yeah, basically you do have a little cheerleader who follows. "I love your jumper, Mummy. You are so kind. You're my favourite person. I love you." Like, it's wonderful.
Absolutely. Oh, they do grow up. But I've got two boys, and they're both still very cuddly at the age of 8 and almost 6. They're adorable, but it is tricky. It's not all a bed of roses. Should we perhaps think about some of the difficult patches of parenting? I will just chuck in there the concept of sleep, and now I'm just gonna let you get on with that.
Get on with that one. Well, actually, before I jump on that, could I add one more positive? Because I think it's one that slipped my mind, but I think it's
Of course
important.
you can.
And it slipped my mind because it's the absence of something. And I think for me, it's the absence of the distress I was feeling about not being a parent yet, and this sense of like, my life will start after. My life will start after I get onto training, or my life will start after I qualify, and sort of always waiting for the future to have the things that you want. And I think I don't experience that distress anymore, and it was very consuming. So I think I have a child and I'm on training. I've sort of got my cake and I got to eat it too. And that for me is probably the biggest positive, actually.
That's so important. Thank you so much for including that. It's exhausting when you're trying to make a decision, isn't it? And it can consume all of your thoughts. So yeah, it's really important. And like you said, it probably can take an average from graduating undergrad to starting clinical training about 7 or 8 years, but that places you at least 28, 27, 29 maybe. And like you said, that really is a key window in fertility journeys for people. So it is a big deal. It's not really something I'd thought about until until this interview, I started the course single, actually, and met my partner in the second week of the second year. And so, we got through it and then got married and then had a baby like a year later. But if I'd met him a few years before, then it might well have been the right time to have a child during training.
Yeah, I sort of do hope that by having these conversations, it's something that people might hold in mind a little bit more, or because I can see why people wouldn't think about that. So, yeah, hopefully, it's just sort of a discussion that can start being had a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Should we think about some of the drawbacks or some of the negatives? Yeah, the tricky parts, exactly that.
I mean, sleep is a big one, isn't it? I'm quite lucky in that I have had a child who does sleep quite well. But, it's not consistent. And I think maybe the thing that struck me the most, even amid all of my planning, I was not aware that when small children attend nursery for the first time, they basically need to develop an immune system. So he was immune to nothing. And for the first 6 months, I'm not exaggerating when I say he got a cold either every week or every second week. He was always sick. And there were minor illnesses. But what it does mean is when he's sick, it disrupts his sleep. He can be just a little bit miserable. But also, I don't have the best immune system. So I was probably picked up every second cold that he had. So I was also perpetually sick for 6 months. And again, they were quite low level. I think 1 or 2 developed into infections. But, but it is exhausting to sort of be unwell for such a long period of time.
Parenting is hard enough without a cough that keeps them awake all night,
Oh my gosh. And like the gag reflex, he coughs and he vomits. And then he cries because it's vomit, and that happens a lot. There's a lot of like late night laundry and late night baths. I think just children are just so unpredictable, aren't they? Because there's the illness, but there's just other things that crop up. They go through different developmental stages. They go through sleep regressions. And it just happens when you don't expect it. And there is just never a good time. People are like, oh, it was a bad time for that to happen. There is never a good time in your training for something to go wrong with your child. There will always be clinical work or important teaching or that important MRP meeting or something. So it's just this constant juggle, and there was a real cognitive workload and an emotional workload that sort of goes with that. You're constantly rejuggling your schedule and your priorities and having to explain things to people and reschedule things, and it can be really exhausting. I think for me there have been quite big issues with childcare. So even though he could stay in childcare throughout COVID, I don't know if people are aware, there's been like a huge impact on the early years sector. COVID and Brexit has meant a mass loss of staff. There are lots of vacancies, and for me that means that they have room closures really often. So I think probably there's been a period where nursery will just close for a day a week or every second week, and I'm left with no childcare. And I'm very fortunate my husband has a very flexible job, so he picks that up when that happens. And I guess other people might have a wider family who could support them, but I think being aware that childcare isn't as consistent as you might think it is. And again, that's just a last-minute juggle of let's change our priorities.
Have you been able to form much of a mummy or parenting network around you? Because I know that your parents are likely in Australia, and the idea of raising my children without, family around would be very, very tricky for me. How's that been for you?
It has been very, very tricky. So, I don't have any immediate family in England, and even my extended family are far away, and neither does my husband. So it really is just the two of us. And because I relocated from the course, I also moved away from my mother's group. I moved away from some very close friends who were the people that I relied on last minute for support. And then even throughout COVID, we didn't have a bubble. It was literally just the two of us with our son. so no, there aren't people I can call on last minute. So like I know during the pandemic there was a time where like we were isolating. My son had a really high temperature. We were nearly out of Calpol. There was a shortage in the shops around us, and I was like, I cannot get Calpol. Like I have no one I can call who can bring me Calpol, and it was really hard. So I don't know that I'd recommend that. I think thinking carefully about relocation and where you live and who is around you, because having people around, is really important. And I think in my mind, I thought I'd be able to make those links after I moved, but then of course the pandemic happened and I couldn't embed myself in my community. I couldn't make those friends. So I guess I'm only just starting to do that now.
I would say you haven't got that currently, but my experience of being in a primary school is that I really hope you'll have that soon. So I am part of a year 4 group and a year 1 group, which is it formed off the back of a birthday party. Actually, someone had put together a birthday party list for the mums on WhatsApp. And after that, we decided to just all stay on it. And it's been invaluable. And also chats at the school gates and stuff has been really useful from preschool onwards, that they've been in the same school. But I have honestly made friends and people that definitely, during COVID as well, like, do you need anything? If people have been ill, I'll drop it round to you. I'll do this, I'll go to the shops, I'm going anyway. And then all these like school collections that happen. Oh, we're going to send stuff to the Ukraine. And I was off sick with a sickness bug. And I was like, I can't get to the supermarket. And someone else was like, well, I'll buy nappies for you and I'll drop them into school, and just ping me the money on PayPal. And actually, it does take a community to raise a child. And I personally have found that I've really built an important community in the other school parents, not even just the mums. There's dads that have been really important in that as well. So I really hope that with your little boy about to start school, that you'll have some of that and you'll find some really supportive tribe members yourself.
Thank you. That is my hope as well. And I guess we're just starting to do it a little bit with preschool, and now that like the room is like the nursery is just open for the first time, we're just allowed back in, and you can already sort of feel those differences. So yeah, that is my hope. It would be wonderful. I guess one other thing that perhaps I wanted to speak to a little bit is I think that I hadn't anticipated going on to training with a child is actually how different I felt, and how it felt a very, very lonely place to be, I think, initially. And I really didn't anticipate it, because I think throughout my life I've always been around parents. In my undergrad I had friends with children. In all of my work there's always been people with parents, my masters, everywhere. And then you sort of get onto training and it's just sort of like, there are no parents here. I had a very large cohort of, I think, 44, and there was one other parent, but just one amongst 44. And having her was invaluable, I think. However, her children were a lot older, so there are still differences there. And I think going into that space, and I think I felt very alone, and I think I felt very misunderstood. And like there was a huge part of my identity that maybe wasn't invited or wasn't included perhaps. And that's, everyone on my cohort, they're lovely people. I love everyone on my cohort. It's not about individual people. I think it is just about the way that the DClin is positioned and framed, and not being able to always go out for drinks when people go out because you have other responsibilities, or if people are going, having a picnic on the weekend, being like, well, I don't think I can make that work. And I really wasn't prepared for that. But I think there is something about owning your position, and I think if I were more confident in that, I could have brought more of myself, and I could have felt more authentic, and I could have felt less lonely. So it's certainly a challenge. I think it is something that can be overcome if people are sort of more confident in that position.
It's very important, and I'm imagining that picnic, they might have said, oh, you could bring him along, but also having been on a picnic with young children, you would spend most of your time going and looking at the ducks, and going and looking at things in the far corner of the field, and that would not be relaxing, and it wouldn't be enriching for you, because everyone else would be having a lovely time and you'd just be off doing something different. And so it's not always that you can, enmesh the two.
Yeah, that's true. Although I don't know, you find people though who enable you to do that. You'll find the friend who will walk with and look at the ducks with you, or the friend who can come over and happily sit with you in your bathroom while you bathe your child and chat, or be with you while you're cooking dinner. And I think it's about finding your people. But maybe it's also about people
You're so right, actually.
yeah.
My husband started a new job on our little boy's, our only child at the time's first birthday, and I was just really upset about that because he was off training for like a whole week. But it was a member of my cohort who came round and did exactly that, did a bath, did cake with me, and bought him a little present. And you absolutely can find your tribe during training as well, even if they don't have parents. She didn't have children at the time. So yeah, I think that's a really valid point. So thank you for making it, Rose.
Yeah. And maybe people who are listening who aren't yet parents, but maybe if you end up on training this year, like maybe it could be something that you think about, like maybe you could seek out the parent, maybe you could invite the parent to the picnic and go and look at the ducks with them, and maybe or invite them to the pub, which is easier if you have a very small child, baby. But maybe if people could hold that in mind a little bit, that would be nice.
It really would. It really would. It feels like I could talk to you all day because there's so much about this. It feels like we need to do like a special extended edition for all these factors because there's so much important stuff. I just wanted to say a big thank you to your university for allowing you to come and speak so openly today because it's an invaluable conversation to have.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I have really enjoyed doing it. Yeah, and I am very grateful to my university. And I don't know that they did give me permission to speak today, but and I have had a really good experience with them. They have been very, very supportive. And yeah, I guess I would really encourage people to think very carefully about what course they do apply to it, and if at interview, if it does feel right for them. And I think there's a real pressure to just like, if I get an offer, I just have to accept it. But just really thinking about like, will this course support me to get through it so that I have a reasonable time, and will they support me to be able to be the parent that I want to be as well, alongside these, the big demands of training.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time today, Rose. And I'd like to wish you all the very best with completing your thesis, completing your final placement, and of course, finding employment once all of this is over. But also, with your parenting journey and any future children that you might want to have as well. I hope that you do really well in whatever it is you want to do.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you for inviting me here, and for opening up this conversation. And I hope more conversations are had in the future.
Thank you so much. It was through a chat on Instagram, I think, wasn't it, that we connected. But thank you so much for being so generous with your time and talking with us about these really important factors. And wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. It has been such a pleasure to chat with Rose. And yeah, I hope that you have found it useful and that it's resonated with you, either because you are a parent or you perhaps know some people who are parents, or maybe, this will be useful for your own training journey ahead, either to become a parent or to start training when you've got children, or to help optimally support and include any parents on your future cohort. Thank you so much for being part of my world. Please do take a moment to rate and review this show or this podcast more generally on the Apple Podcast, which you can do by scrolling right down to the bottom of the show, right below episode 1 and below the trailer episode, and then you will spot the rate and review section. To do that takes you a moment, but helps me so much to help demonstrate that what we do in this podcast really matters and is really useful. If you really, really like the podcast, you can also make a donation to help cover the costs, and the details of that are in my link tree in the show notes. There are details in the show notes as well of Rose's clinical course, but I do believe that it is entirely possible to successfully have children on other courses too. So let's not massively stack out their applications next year if you are a parent. But yeah, wishing you well wherever you are, and stay kind to yourself. Take care.
If you're looking to become a psychologist, then let this be your guide. With this podcast at your side, you'll be on your way to being qualified. It's the Aspiring Psychologist podcast with Dr. Marianne, Trent.